So, good morning, everybody. I hope you hear me, and I'll try to share my screen now. So the recording started. Okay, so let's start. Today we have to cover almost a big topic for the second attestation lectures, because starting from the next lecture, starting from the next week, you will defend the first part of your project. That's why we have to cover key points for finish your projects. So let's create here week number 12, and I want to copy the Django project from the previous week example. So charm. So can you hear me and see my screen now? Can you confirm it?
Yes.
Yeah. Perfect. Okay. Okay. Have the second environment here. I think we can. Okay, let's leave it. Postman we need. What is the preferences for Postman? So that I want to change to white. And we have here week number 11. So week number 11, we want to just duplicate it, and it's week number 12. So I think we can close this one, and we want to work inside of the category. So from previous lecture, we know that we can create the functions inside of the views to perform the HTTP methods. So in case of the CRUD, so for creating an object, we want to send the request as a post request. So as you can see from this URL, so let's for now remove the requirements. So from this URL, we can see that for this the categories endpoint, we have this function execution, and depending on the method, if it's a get, we want to do something. If it's a post, we want to do others. So we know that if it's a get request, we have to get the data from the database. This line will take the data from the database. And in the next line, we want to convert it to the JSON format. So in our case, it's just a dictionary format. And after that, we want to respond it to the client side. In case of the post request, so do we know if it's a post request and we are expecting the data from the request. And inside of the request, we have the attribute called body, which holds the string format of the sended data. And we want to convert it to the JSON object. So JSON load function will help us to convert it to the Python dictionary. After getting the data, we want to create a new category. Using the data information and data fields inside of these objects. So in our case, we have only name. That's why we are passing it like a name. So instead of this one, you can do it also in this case. So if I have the dictionary, to extract the fields like in the previous format, you can put 2 times star sign, like in our quarks argument in the default functions. We have the arguments and we have keyword arguments, which is a quarks. In that case, you can also pass it to like using the two times the star sign. So it's the same thing as like this. If you have only data, inside of the data, if you have only name. So after that, after creating, if it's everything is okay without any errors, after that we want to just convert it to the JSON and send it back. And all the things for working for the from the one category, so the one object, selected object, which is a category ID, and depending on the method types, we want to do the different cases. So, so these examples were implemented by ourselves. So it's over here. So today we want to, let's open it first. Today we want to talk about the Django views. So the views, what is inside of the Django, and how can we, which types we have, and how can we over here, and how can we implement a different type of views inside of the Django project. So what we did today, so what we have today here, the execution of the request, in our case, they are called the function-based views. So we have the HTTP response, and instead of the HTTP response, we'll have the JSON response, which just extends from that one. And we have the just simple Python functions, which will take the first argument as a request, which is a HTTP request object. And depending on the method type, we are doing some logic and so on. This type of the functions, this type of the execution functions called the function-based views. Inside of the Django, they call them function-based views. And we have the second type of the execution of the APIs. For the Django, inside of the from Django views, we have the class called view, which is if you open it, it's just a class which is extends from the object. It's just a class like a person, like a student, and so on, and which will have the different type of some extra fields and extra methods. One of them is HTTP method names. So here we have the list of all possible HTTP methods that can be sent to this class. So this is just a array HTTP method names. And initializing point, and we have one more extra the method, class method, which calls as view. We'll talk about it a little bit later. And all other stuffs to allow us use this class as a root class for the class-based views. So inside of the class-based views, to work with the APIs, to work with the data that was sent to our system, you have to create a simple class like a class myView, and your class you have to be extended from this view class inside of the Django. And after that, your class will have different type of functions which will take the arguments, which will take the handle the HTTP methods. So for instance, your class in our case, myView, extends from the view, and after that, this my class, this myView class might have, so this myView class might have different type of methods: get method, post method, put method, patch, and so on for other cases. Like this example shows that we have the get method, and inside of the get method, it's just a method of this class, myView class. And obviously, the first argument should be the self because it's a method, instance method. And after that, as always, like in our function-based view, the next first argument should be the request. And all the other stuff goes the same. So here I have the inside of the function, we are separating the logic of the APIs using the methods like equals to get. And in case of the class-based views, so after extending from this class, you will have the separate functions for get function, so the get method, separate function for the post method, and so on. And depending on this HTTP method, on this request method, for this class, so view class will identify which function should be called. And that's it. This is powerful because inside of the one class, you will have the all needed, logic for the HTTP methods. And when you are creating a function, class-based views, after creating like these class-based views, how can you write? So if it's a function-based view, it's enough to put here the name of the function. So if someone sends to this endpoint request, we want to call this function. It is obviously. And in case of the class-based view, you have to call the one more extra function, which called asView, as we see from this file. We have here asView function. This function will take all the HTTP methods that you have inside of your class. For instance, we have here only a get method. All these methods, and for that methods will identify the URL. And for this case, on this case, you have to call this function. For instance, here I have the URL like categories, and here I have the category view and dot as view. This is key point, and you don't have to forget this one, because without this function, your class-based view cannot be executed. So like this, you can create a class-based views, and you have to understand the difference between the class-based and function-based view. So in the end, in the end of the execution of the Django APIs, all the function-based views and class-based views will be executed like a function-based views. Why? Because even we have here the class. So for us, class is the collection of the functions, and after that, after identifying which function should be called, and at the end, one function will be called for each endpoint. So, okay, today we have to start working with the Django REST framework, which is a very powerful and helpful library for the Django development. When you have the Django as a backend side for any platform. So this library, if you click to this button, this is just a documentation of that library. This framework will help us to rapidly develop the APIs for any cases, for any possible cases. In this site, you can see there's different type of tutorials that you can do it by yourself, and APIs for each type of the sections. So the topics, for instance, for any needed data you can find over here. So topics also separated like this, and inside of the community you can ask the questions if you have. Even if you have questions, it's enough to just Google it, and you will get the very quick results. So this framework help us um, to implement almost the same APIs like in our case, so as we did by ourselves. But in the case of the Django REST framework, it can be done using the less line of code, and very quickly and very powerfully, and reusable code can be increase your development. That's why, except the increasing the development, this framework will provide you to use the other third-party libraries and collect them, merge them, and in the mix you will have the very powerful features in your project. So you can read all of the stuffs here, so the founding and so on. And here I have the requirements for working with the Django REST framework. In the requirements, we have the Python 3.5 as minimum, and Django 2.2 as a minimum for working with this framework. So let's open here. Let's open here and pip install Django 2.2. So it's already installed inside of this environment. So pip show Django shows 2.2, and Python will have here 3.6. That's why all requirements are satisfied. And after that, you can install this library using this command, pip install Django REST framework without any dashes, without any spaces. In this environment, which was created, it's already installed. and you can see the pip show Django REST framework, and it's also a 3.12 version was installed in this library, so in this environment. And these two stuffs can be done if you want to use a browser side to markdown for the APIs and so on. For now, we don't need these two extra libraries, and it's enough to install the first one to work with the Django REST framework. And if you don't have the, if you don't want to install it using the pip, you can install it using just cloning from the official GitHub repository and install it by to your system. So after installing in the environment of your project, what you have to do is, after installing, you have to add it inside of the installed apps. So inside of the installed apps, I want to add REST framework. So as you can see here, we have, as the first part, we have the Django applications, which are already exist. In the next section, I want to third part application. And in the last part, we have local applications. So like this separation will give the more readability. And so application. And for this part, so all the installed apps from the Django, here we have the all extra installed libraries, and here we have the applications which were created from us. So like this, we have to add it inside of the installed apps, and after that, in your Django project, you can use the ability of the Django REST framework. So, so it's just one configuration that can be. So one configuration that can be that should be done inside of the application. After that, if you type here the REST framework, you can see that all the stuffs can be available here. Okay, like this, you can configure the Django REST framework in your application. So, what is the Django REST framework, which is a DRF in short? So, as we discussed before, which is the Django REST framework will give you to write a code which can be used, a reusable code for the development. It means, how can we provide this reusable code using the object-oriented design? So which means you can create a class that can be used every time and implement the, in short lines of code, implement the very big logic. So the DRF builds directly off the Django function-based views. So, which means we know about the function-based view. This is a function-based view, and it says DRF builds directly from the Django function, the class-based views. So, so this class-based views, as we know, this view class is just parent root class for all class-based views. So this view class is just a parent for all class-based views, and it says Django REST frameworks extends from this class. In our case, it's just a view class. And if you understand the class-based view inside of the Django, then DRF it's just extension for that. Okay, and the serializing system. So serializing system, which means using the Django REST framework, you can implement the serializing the data and deserializing data. In our case, serializing the data, which means this line. So we are getting from the database the list of items. So in our case, list of categories. And the line 20, in our case, it will just serialize the objects, so the category objects, to the JSON format. In this case, we have the serializing by ourselves, which was implemented by also ourselves, these two JSON function, which can be called one by one and to do the conversion from the Django model object to the dictionary. And this line can so the replace it in case of the Django REST framework can be replaced using the serializers inside of this library. And about the authentication and authorization can be also powerful to implement them. And it says if you really want to use the function-based views, so inside of the so we know about the function-based views, and if you really want to use the function-based views inside of the DRF, you can also convert it to the function-based views using the decorators, and these decorators can be so these decorators will be shown a little bit later. So about this, you can also read to your home. So here we are talking about the HTTP methods inside of the APIs. Just note which point you have to pay attention when you are writing APIs. So in this slide, we want to talk about the serializing and deserializing the data. So about the serializing, we already discussed. So the 20th line, we are by ourselves manually serializing the data. Where is the deserializing the data? Deserializing means if we have the request body in case of the creation of the new object, request body is just a string of the data that was sent to our system, and this string converted to the dictionary. And this case, this process will call the deserializing data. So using these two parts, these two parts can be done using the serializations inside of the Django REST framework. For that, so I want to create here the dictionary or package. That will be the Python package. And Python package will call the views. So I want to implement inside of this views folder, I want to implement different type of views. That's why these views, let's rename it. So the views and week number 11. So I want to refactor it. And I want to put it inside of this folder. So if you have different applications, so if you have the different type of views, and if you want to store them inside of the one folder in application, you can do it like creating a name of the package which is same as our views. And to extract these two functions, you have to implement it inside of the init function. So inside of the init function, I'm saying from views underscore the week 11 from this file, I want to list a category list. I want to export the category list and category detail. And after that, if you open the URLs, and it can identify, because API views, in our case, it's a not file anymore. It's just a dictionary. So it's not dictionary, it's just the package, like a folder. And inside of the folder, I want to import these two functions, but when the Python sees some folder, it will try to define the file init. And inside of the init, what you extracted, what you imported will be available like as before. And that's it. And inside of this file, you can create your own extra so the views to implement a different type of functionalities. Okay, I want to copy this one. Let it be the 12th element. So week number 12. Yes. Inside of the 12th. So the other things will be the same. And what we want to do now. Today, I want to implement the same thing as before. Same thing as before. So the data will be the same. And here I want to show the power of the serializers inside of the Django REST framework. For that, I want to create a Python file inside of the application, file called serializers. Inside of the serializers, we can create our own serializers from the Django REST framework. For that, from REST framework, I want to import a section called serializers. In this serializers class, inside of the serializer section, we have the different type of classes. You can open it and you can see by yourself that we have the different type of classes and implementations for that. So, so I want to create a serializer for the category class, which means I have to import it. So API, so the models and category, and inside of the not it's just inside of the main, I think, or core, I think. So the core models category. So here, and I want to create a serializer for the category class. For that, I have to create a class that will be the category, and the name of the serializers by default they are recommended like use the name of the functionality, and after that followed by the serializer suffix. Serializer, and this class just an empty class which is a Python class, and this class will become as a serializer if you want. You have to extend from the different class. So what first option is just a serializer class. So after extending from this serializer class, your class can be used as a serializer and the deserializer data. And inside of the class, you have to say which fields you want to serialize, or which fields you want to deserialize it. And what we have inside of the category. Inside of the category, we have only ID and name, which should be deserialized using our serializer. That's why I'm just listing. ID is the first field that I want to serialize it. And like in our models, I have to say which data type should be the ID field. I know that it's an integer field. Second one is name. Serializer char field. About it, I also know. So that's it for this class. So let's call this one. This simple class, which extends from the serializer and will have the two fields, two properties, which is ID and name. It's ready to serialize our data using these two items for any object. And inside of the week number 12, I want to import it. So API, serializers, and category serializer. And where I can use this serializer. So we talked about this line, that in this line we are serializing it by manually using the toJSON field. So instead of this calling the toJSON function, I want to create serializer object. Serializer equals to category serializer. This is the category serializer. And inside of this serializer, I want to just pass our objects. So this categories which was taken from the database, I want to pass it inside of the category serializer. So this category serializer will take each object from the list and will take these two fields from that object's ID and name. And we don't need anymore this line. And after serializing all the data using the categories, inside of the serializer we'll have the field called data, and that's it. So let's run our application. So we'll run it in the debug mode. And where is the Postman? So Postman is here. Category list. So API category list. So let's check it again. Inside of the URLs we have the category list, and inside of the views we are now importing the 11th examples, so from this file, and I want to change it to the 12th file, which is over here, which will use a serializer inside of the API. So we are taking the data from the database, passing it to the serializer, and the work for the serializer is just to convert it to the dictionary. If you send a request, so you will have the error. It says the serializer field might be the name incorrectly. reset object has no attribute. Oh, so we forgot about the second option. So the attribute that we have to pass to the serializer if you have number of objects. In our case, categories is just a list of objects, list of categories. And if you are just want to convert the list of items, in that case, you have to pass the second argument, which is a many, should be equals to true, which says we are sending a list of objects and the work for the serializer is just converted to the dictionary. And that's it. Let's try it again. And after that, you can see that we have our results. So I think is converted to like this. Okay, we have results, which is an ID, name, and so on, and this type of data, which is like before. Oh, it's just identifying. Okay, like this, you can see that the results are the same as before. So ID and name. So if you open the serializer and comment this line and save it, restart and set it again, and you will have only the name. So like this, you can configure and you can get all the needed data inside of the serializer. So the serializer will take each argument, so each object inside of this category, like we did one by one in the list, and try to take these two fields depending on the data type. It's an integer, it's a char, and after that it will get the results from this file. And in this case, we are just serializing the data. So this part will take serializing the data. After serializing, you will have the serialized.data, which is already converted to the dictionary object. And in the next case, which is a deserialize, how can we use deserializers to implement for getting a data from the request? And here we have the post request, which is for creation. Here we have the post request which is for creation. And request body is just a dictionary, so it's just a string that can be implemented over here. And what we can do for categories in this case. So inside of the categories, you might have the different type of functions. When you are getting a data from the request, and after that, if you want to create an object, for instance, like in our case, it's a category object, you can also use your serializer, for instance, serializer like this. But in our case, we want to first of all validate the data that was set to the system. So in that case, you can use it like a data attribute. Data equals to data that was getted from the request. So the request body, which was converted to the dictionary. Here I have the request data, like a data here. And inside of the serializer, you have to set like a data equals to something. So serializers can be used in different cases. So this is the first case when you don't have any attributes and you are just passing it to serialize it to the dictionary format. It's the first case. In second case, you can use it like a data equals to some dictionary. And after that, you can check the validation of this incoming data. So we know that this is the incoming data. And inside of the serializers, the powerful of the serializer, you can implement the validation of that data. For that, inside of the serializer, you have the function called isValid. IsValid function will return the true or false. If it's a true, it means this sended data is sent correctly. If it's a false, in that case, you have the errors from the serializer. So that's why, if it's a true, I will do something here, and if something goes outside of the if request, so the if condition, in that case, you will have the serializer And after isValid function called, if we have some errors, these errors will be stored inside of the errors field inside of the serializer. And that's it. So I want to return the errors if we don't have any errors, so the isValid is executed and it returns a true. In that case, I want to call the serializer.save function. So serializer.save function. So how can we save the serializer? So we can save the model, we know about it, but serializers also can be saved. How? Serializers can be saved only inside of the serializer class. You have to implement one function which called create. So this create function will be called if you create a serializer using a data equals something, and if you are calling the serializer.save. So while you are calling the serializer.save, depending on this passed parameter, inside of the serializer will be called different functions. For instance, in our case, it's just a create function will be called if you are passing it like this. And inside of the create function, you can do your implementation of creation of an object. In our case, what we want to do, we want to create a new category. And validated data is just a dictionary that was passed. So that was passed over here. So the request body, what we have inside of the request body will be validated, and after that pass it to this function, which means here you can create the category. So the try. So the category. So I think from core model category. So the category objects create, and inside of the validate data, so you can pass it here like a name, validated data get name, and that's it, and return the category object as a result. And this create function will take the first argument like a validated data, which was passed to the system. And inside of the validated data, I want to take a name like this field, and I want to create a new object of the category and implement it and return it back. After saving, you can also response it like a serializer.data, which is like a just saved data that was saved correctly and successfully will be returned if everything is okay. So for instance, if you are missing this line and sending request, and you have these two validations, we don't have any if-else condition for checking the ID for ID or name, but it shows that ID field is required and the name field is required. From this response, we can see that our serializer will identify. So these two fields will be validated. So as you can see, we don't have any field. That's why this shows, and this message will show that says ID and name is required, because inside of the serializer, it's just expected to this field, these two fields. And isValid function, so in our case, isValid function returns a false. So if you send it a request, so here I have this serializer, and isValid function will return the false if we don't have any needed data. And if you pass it, it will go to the error side. And inside of the errors, you will have these two messages. So ID is required and name is required. So like this isValid function will help us to validate our sending data. For instance, if you are getting back like a name, it says ID is required. So we know that ID is not required because ID should be auto incremented. But in our serializer, we are just listed like ID should be the integer, and by default, all the values, all the fields which were created like this will be like required fields for creating an object. That's why, so we know that ID is not required. That's why we are passing here parameter called read only equals to true. And after that, ID parameter will be just used for the read-only fields. So which means when we are creating a new object, in that case, ID will be just skip it. So the validation of the ID when you are creating a new object, so in our case like this, so the validation is valid function will just skip the ID field. And after that, if you are calling the save function, as we created our serializer like a data equals to something, it will call the function called create inside of the serializer. If you send it, you will have over here our code, and validated data is just the data that was validated from our serializer, which means which have the category 6, which we send it over here. And using this category 6, you can create an object and return it back. And if you pass it, you will have the result like a ID and the name. How? Because we have here response serializer data, as we did before. Serializer data, it might be the list. Serializer data, it might be the only one object, depending on the what you are passing here. So as you can see here, we have implemented class like a serializer for converting to the dictionary using these two fields and implementing for one function, and all other classes, all other models can be implemented almost the same case in this for getting a list of items and for adding the new item. For instance, if you have the product class inside of the product, so the list of items will be just different, so ID, name, or price, and so on, description, and so on. But other cases, other functions, or other implementations will be the same. So this code will be just the same for category, for products also, because the logic and for other subs will be the same, because we are doing the CRUD operation for the serializers. So inside of the detail field, so for after getting the item, so for instance, here we have the converting to the dictionary. You can do it like this. It's not too many, just a category. After extending a category, instead of calling the toJSON function, you can use the serializer.data, and you will have the one item as we expected. In case of the put function, so we have here data that was sent from the request, and we have the category object which should be updated. How can we update? And using the data, using our serializer. In this case, we have to use a third version of the using of the serializer. In our case, it should be like this. When you are updating an object, in this case, you have to pass extra fields. So the first one should be the instance. Instance means which object should be updated. In our case, it's a category. And second one is data. And data is just a data that was sent from this request. So as you can see, we have the three versions of using a serializer. The first one is when we have just a list of objects and we want to convert it to the dictionary. So just a many true and that's it. Second one, when we have only one object and without any many true, we can also convert it to the dictionary. Third one, when we have the data equals something. And in this case, if you are creating a serializer like a data equals something, when you call the function save, the serializer will call inside of this class function called create, which means if you are passing only data, serializer understands that you want to create a new object, and that's why it will call the function create. In our last case, if you are passing the two objects like instance and data, in that case, serializer can identify that you want to update something. That's why serializer is valid, same as before, and serializer.save. We don't have any function for updating. So for calling like a implicitly update, you are calling as you can see, you are calling the same thing as before. So serializer here is valid and save. Serializer is valid and save. is valid and safe. Only the difference is over here. If you are passing the object, in that case, serializer can identify that you want to update the something, and inside of the class, it will call the function called update. Comparing with the create one, update will handle the two arguments, which is the instance and value. So the validated data. So validated data, which is sent to our system, and instance is which object I want to update. And inside it, I want to instance, in our case, name equals to validated get name, because I'm only have here inside of the update, I have only the name that was updated. And instance.save. Why? Because instance is just a model, and I have to save it after changing the fields and return the instance. And that's it for update function, implementing of the update function. And inside of the view, I can remove this one. We don't need anymore. Return JSON fields, so the JSON response as before, serializer.data. And if it's not valid, in that case, it should be the serializer errors, and that's it. So, as you can see here, we have the instance and data. And when you are calling the serializer save function for just like created serializer, in this case, it will call the function update. And inside of the update, you can update it manually by getting each field and updating the fields, and after that saving the data inside of the database. And or other lines of code will be the same when you are creating a new object. So let's update it. So update 2, and as you can see, we are updating it perfectly without any errors. If you just skip this time, it says the name is required. It goes from this isValid function. IsValid function returns false, and this responds the errors, which is hold the ID, so the name should be required. And like this, you can update it. For deleting the object, we don't need any serializers, because deleting an object, you can just call the delete function for the category model object, and that's it. So in this case, you can see that many lines of code, they are similar. For instance, these 5 lines and these 5 lines are similar. For converting it to the dictionary, like a serializer data, and they are similar. And if you imagine, if you want to implement the same logic for the product category, product data, product model, all the things will be the same. Just difference will be the name of the class here, name of the model, and name of the serializer, and all other stuffs will be the same. In the view side, all other stuffs will be the same except of these 2 fields. So the category will be replaced with the product, and this serializer will be replaced with the product serializer, and that's it. And all other stuffs will be the same. And this is key point, and you have to understand this one. So any questions for now, guys? Any questions for now?
Excuse me, what does the function get inside of the create function?
Okay, thanks. Get function will so inside of the create function we have the validated data, which is a dictionary. Inside of the dictionary, you can get it like using the square brackets. It's also it can be also used, but by default I recommend to use a get, because in other dictionaries you might have that in other dictionaries it might be that name field doesn't exist inside of the validated data, but in our case it always guaranteed that the name should be inside of the validated data, because name is required. This create function always will take the validated data, which guarantee that inside of it we have the name field, like a name key field inside of it. And you can do it like a square brackets also for getting a data, for getting a value of the name inside of this dictionary and set it to the name for creating, and here we have the set it to the updating the object, and after that save it. Okay, any other questions, guys? Okay, if you don't have questions, so let's move on. So serializing this serializing, creating a serializer class, we already did it. So the serializer class, we extend from the serializer and we implement these two fields and these two functions. And you have to understand that these two functions also will be almost the same for the other models. For instance, if you are implementing the category zero, so the product serializer, inside of the product serializer, just the list of fields will be the different, and here we have the list of fields also will be the different, and here also this different, and all other stuffs for creating and for updating will be the same for the for the product class also. And now I want to show second example for creating a serializer. It would be the category serializer 2. So category serializer 2. Okay. No, so category serializer 2, and in this case, I want to extend from not serializer class. I want to extend from the model serializer class. Inside of the Django REST framework, we might have the different type of extendings. So the first one, which we extended from the serializer. In the second case, I want to extend from the model serializer. And inside of the model serializer, you might have the different type of extra possibilities to write less lines of code. As you can see here, it's already implemented the create function. So we created by manually, so by ourselves that they create, and we are listing the listing of the fields and so on. After that, they're creating an object. And inside of the model serializer, this function which is already implemented. So it will take the validated data and it will just take all the validated data about, and depending on the model that was stored inside of the meta class, it will create a new object. So inside of the meta class, we will pass the configuration, like a configurations name of the model. So let's create a meta class, and inside of the meta class, I'm saying that this serializer will be used for the category class. And second field that should be inside of the model serializer, it's just a fields argument. And inside of the fields, you have to pass the which columns inside of the database you want to serialize or deserialize for this category model. And I'm saying here ID and name. ID and name. And that's it. And inside of the model serializer, as you can see, we are just creating a new object and so on. And here I have update also. So the update function, which we implemented over here, also exists inside of this class. It says ID, so the instance, in our case, it's a category, and validated data, it's just a field that was passed to the API. And it will just loop over inside of the items. Items means these fields. And it will just set attribute. So instance attribute equals to the value that was passed. And after that, it will the same. The same thing as we did here. So ID, so the instance name equals to the new name and instance save. So it will just use it inside of the for loop because we don't need how many fields we have. After that, after saving, it will just return it. So like this, so the model serializer will give the ability to just provide the two configurations, like a model name, which model I want to, and which fields I want to convert to the dictionary, so that to the serialize it or deserialize it. And after that, let's use the second serializer for all cases that we used before. So I'm just removing the serializer, which is the first part, which is this one. and I'm changing it to the serializer number 2. And inside of the serializer number 2, I don't have any listings like this, and any implementation of these two functions. And let's check it. First one works perfectly. Second one, let it be the 7, creates perfectly. And so 9th, so it's a 10th, which was just created now. And updating for the 10th one, 7 updated. And if you show it, you can see it here. And deleting also the same thing. And as you can see from this case, we are converted to this case. And less lines of code and all the stuffs, as we know that the already implemented inside of the model serializer, these two classes, so these two functions, and these two data types in the model serializer will be taken from the category model. Inside of the category model, we have here char field, and in it case, it means model serializer will identify that inside of the category, the name field who was the child, so the char field, and extending from that one, it will just map it at the starting point of our class. So the model serializer. So where is that? Okay, and here we have the mappings, which means if you are inside of the model field, inside of the models, if it's a char field, it means this char field, which means is inside of the serializer, as we did before. Serializer.char field will be used like in this mapping. And that's it. So the second serializer, as you can see, will be the less code and will be the same thing as before. So any questions for now?
How does serializer understand that ID is read-only?
So ID is read-only because inside of the model field, we know that inside of the even models, we know ID is not exist, which means model class, which is over here, will be stored inside of the, so ID will be stored inside of that class. And inside of the serializer, also it will just skip all the fields when we are, so let's try to find. So when we are getting the data, so ID will be skipped because ID will be after incremented always. After incremented always. So the read only fields. Inside of the serializer, it should implement the read-only fields like so the PK. Default field names. Okay, field names. So here we are listing the list of all field names, which means field names from the meta class, and inside of the model info, we are taking the primary key fields. Primary key field also. So here to represent. So inside of the serializers, we have the two functions. So first one is to internal value, and second one is to representation. To internal value will be called for converting this data to the dictionary inside of the system. And second one, when we want to serialize it, when we want to serialize the data from the database to the dictionary format. So I will just check But by default, it's just skip the PK value as an read-only writable fields. Well, let's see these writable fields. So the fields value read-only, not read-only. So read-only. Blocks. So I will see and I will try to find that one. So by default, it will just keep the ID field like read only, because ID field will be read only for all models, because ID will be incremented automatically. That's why ID should be just skip it.
How can we set read only to other fields?
So read only to other fields. For that case, you have to implement, if you want to configure the other fields, for instance, let it be the name also will be the read only. In that case, you have to manually create, like we did before, manually create the char field, for instance, serializer char field. And after that, you have to pass like a read only through manually like this. But by default, ID will be the read only, but for extra fields that should be also read only, you have to manually do it like this, which is the first case. Second case, you can pass here read only fields. Read only fields fields list inside of it. You can pass also the name, and in that case, you can skip this one. For this list, it's which is a serializing and deserializing list. And this list will be just one of these from the previous list, which fields which are should be the read only. You can do these two parts so that you can do it like using this. As you can see here, we are taking from the meta class, we are taking read only fields as we did here. Read only fields, which equals to the name. And it will take the read only fields, and if it's not empty, and it will just check that it's a list or not list, and depending on the read only fields, it will just get a read only true quartz for that field that we are passing over here. And you can like your first option, and you can second option like do it manually. Okay, any other questions, guys?
So our category serializer second will automatically set the read-only true for every primary keys from the data, yes?
Yeah, inside of the models, inside of the category model, we are extending from the model, and it says automatically that we have the PK column, which is an ID column, which is auto increment. And if you are extending from the model's serializer, and if you are providing the name of the model, it means for this model, the ID field, which is primary key, will be automatically the read only. Only the primary key field. In our case, it's just the ID or PK. So the ID and PK will be the same inside of the Django. So I will always write like an ID for more understanding. So do not save. And all other stuffs will be the same as we did before. So any questions, guys? Okay, if we don't have any questions for now, it's finished the first lecture. And let's take a 3 minutes break. And after that, we'll continue the next part of today's lecture. Guys, let's continue. So the week number, so the lecture number 13, and now I have to, so the URLs will be almost the same. So in this tutorial, in this lecture, we want to implement the CRUD using the DRF, which we already did here, but not all parts. So inside of the week number 12, we already did the CRUD tutorial using the serializers, but not the DRF whole. So for that, for implementing it using almost all cases in the Django REST framework, we have the two options, as we discussed when we starting from the previous lecture. So we have the two options for implementing the APIs using the Django REST framework. First one is class-based, second one is function-based. And for these two cases, we have two possibilities. The first one is using the function-based view, which will use an API, so the decorator called API view. So let's implement it. So I want to create here Python file. So the views, first one is function-based views. Function-based views, inside of it, first of all, I want to import function views, so function decorators, and using this API view. Function decorators and API view. So let's compare with the previous one. So the previous one was like this. So we are just skipping the CSRF token here and implementing the, so let's copy these two functions. So we are just, this one also will be here. We are just decorating the CSRF skipping and doing the stuffs like this. But in case of the API view, so that this decorator, API view decorator, will help us to create DRF functions, which is a function-based view. For that, you have to decorate your function using the API view, and inside of the API view, skipping the CSRF token also will be executed. Sorry. Okay, inside of the API view, you will have the list of items, and it says HTTP method names. HTTP method names, which says which method names will be executed inside of this function. We know that it's just a get and post. That's why inside of the list we are setting that get and post. And we are configuring that these two methods, HTTP methods, will be allowed. What HTTP method will be allowed to send to this API. And it says, depending on these HTTP methods, will be implemented this HTTP methods list. And depending on that list, will be checked which HTTP method will be sent it over here and how can we handle that one. So after covering our function using the API view decorator, we have a little bit difference inside of our function. Let's put here the HTTP message, so the checkpoint here, and I want to use inside of this init function. I want to use views, function-based views, category list and category detail. We have only category list for now. That's why it's enough. And I want to send a request. Let's copy from this category detail also. Put it over here. And inside of the init, I want to use the category detail also. And that's it. Okay, it's not needed for now. Okay, I'm putting here checkpoint, and I want to compare it. So I'm sending the request, and I'm over here. And if you see the request object, if you see the request object and it says REST framework request. So we know that inside of the REST framework, we have the request file, and inside it, we have the request object. The same thing inside of the response file, we have the response class. If you remember from our previous lectures, inside of the Django, we have so the HTTP request file, and so the request file, and inside of it, we have HTTP request class. In the same case, we have the HTTP response class. So these two classes, which are implemented inside of the Django as a root class for these two type of the objects. This one for requests, this one for the response. And inside of this HTTP response, we have the JSON response, which we used in the previous examples. And for now, if you are decorating your function using the API view, which is inside of the Django REST framework, and after that, this request object is not this HTTP request anymore. It's just this one. So the request object inside of the Django REST framework, as you can see here, Django REST framework request object, which means it will just override these two classes. For instance, these two classes, if you open, for instance, response, it will extend from the simple template response. And this simple template response, as you can see, will be extended from the HTTP response, which is this class, which is over here. And here we have the request object, from the Django's response and request objects. And after decorating the API view, you will have the input like a request object from this class. And at the response, you have to return it like a response. You have to return the data using this class, which is the response class, which means over here, we don't need any JSON response anymore. That's why save files also can be skipped. And instead of this one, you can use a response and serializer.data. And that's it. That's it for getting a list of items. And you will have the result. So as you can see here, we are just keeping, first of all, CSRF, which is already implemented inside of the API view. And we are sending a list of HTTP methods. For instance, if you are trying to set a put HTTP method for this URL, it says HTTP put is not allowed, because in this list, we don't have any put. So that's why we are just restricting the sending requests except of these two ones. And if it's a get one, it will be executed, and depending on the gets, it will take the result, serialize it, and respond it like this. And we don't need any save false, because we are just using the response class from this file. And let's check inside of the post request. So if you are creating a new object, we are over here. We have request.body. Request.body, inside of it, we have the string-based over data that was over here, string-based over data. But when you are using API view decorator, inside of the function, request object, which is this request object from the Django REST framework, will have the data called, so the attribute called data. And as you can see, data is already converted to the dictionary object, which means this line can be skipped and this line is not needed anymore. So we are just converting to the dictionary by ourselves manually using the JSON library, like loads and so on. But in our case, if you are decorating it like an API view, and after that you will have only the request data. Request data will be the already created the dictionary. That's why we can remove this one. And instead of the data, we can use a request.data. And let's check it. 66. Oh, we are just skipping. Why? Because let's check it. So we are just put it like a read only. That's why it will just skip the data and it will create a category without any name. So let's check it again. And as you can see here, we have the category object. So, so after decorating this API view, this function can be completely set like a function-based view, which was implemented using the Django REST framework, because we are using all the stuffs which can be used inside of the Django REST framework, which means serializers and JSON response data from the response class, which should be the response in the JSON format, and so on. And in the same case, you can use inside of the API view for other stuffs. In this case, we have here put, and last one is delete. And inside of this delete and all other stuffs, you can replace it with the response like this, and we don't need this conversion to the JSON anymore. And instead of the data, we can use a request.data. And all other stuffs will be the same almost. So here we have the response. So response, and that's it. And that's it. You can check it, and it will work as we expected before. But in this case, we are just using all the stuffs from the Django REST framework from the function-based views. So function-based views will be just like this. Any questions for now, guys?
Excuse me, where we have connection between view FBV and our
URL,
our views package?
So views package URL okay. Views package over here. So we are not changing the URLs by file. We are saying API views, but in our case, views, it's not a file. It's just a package. It's just a like a folder. But as we are just importing the name of the functions, it will try to find inside of the dictionary file called init. So like initializing this model. And inside of the init function, I'm changing the different files, which is the first file, second file, and now I'm using this third file, this file. As you can see here, I'm using the third file, which is a function-based view over here, and these two functions. Can you understand? Are you with me?
Okay, thanks.
Okay, other questions? So if you don't have questions, we have to move on because we have the limited time and we have to cover all other stuffs. So depending on regarding to the function-based views, it's enough to understand what's going on inside of these functions. So for now, we want to implement it inside we want to implement the same result, so the same API views, but using the class-based views. So the views and class-based views. For class-based views, from the slides, you can see that we have class called API view inside of the REST framework views. From REST framework views, we have the API view. And you can also see the content of this API view. As you can see, it will just implement, so the extends from the view that was at the beginning of today's lecture. Today's lecture we are starting from Django views import view class. This view class, it's just a root class for the class-based views. And as you can see, we are just seeing the API view from the REST framework, and it will extend from that class, and it can be used over here. And inside of the API view, which is inside of the REST framework, we have the extra fields and extra configurations for working with our the class-based views. So the rendering class and so on, all other stuffs, the as view and so on. Okay, let's implement it. So class view, class-based APIs. So the class category, let it be the category list API view. So the name of the class, let it be like this, because when you are creating class-based views, it's recommended to end it like like our extending class. So in our case, I want to extend from this class, from this API, so API view class. And inside it, we have the configurations for the settings, configurations for other methods, so the functions for allowing methods and so on, HTTP methods, and all other functions that can be used over here. So all other stuffs you can check it manually by yourself. But for now, we have to understand that for both of these cases, for our functions or for our classes, we are receiving the request instance in the view. So as we see from the function-based view, this request is just a request from the Django REST framework, and add context to the response. So which means we have to return. So we have to change it to the response object from the Django REST framework. And we have to respond it like a response class from the Django REST framework. And method not allowed means inside of the API views, we are listing the methods that allowed to implement inside of this function, which means other HTTP methods cannot be implemented. A parser error, which means inside of the data, if you are passing the data which is not correctly parsed, in that case, you will have the error in the case of the is valid, and it will show the results over here. Okay, API view we already implemented. We rewrite the APIs using the API view. And for now, we will have to write it using the API view class-based views. So inside of the API view, so let's implement it. And inside of the API views, we have different type of functions. So about the API views, we can also see that. So where is the? For now, let's copy this one. So the API views. So here I have the REST framework provides the API view, which is a extends from the Django and so on. You can read all of these stuffs at yourself, and we have here the examples for configuring our classes and which functions we have inside of this class and so on, and examples for the API view decorators and so on. What we have, so here we have the get method inside of the API view, and API views. What is the example for? Class-based views. So here we have the example inside of the tutorials. We have the in the third tutorial we have the class-based view example for implementing the different type of functionalities. For we have the snippet list and snippet detail as we did from the previous examples. So we have the category list and category detail, but in this case we have the class-based views. And inside of these class-based views, we have the separated functions which are separated by the HTTP methods. This is the get method which can be called when we are sending to this class get request. This method will be called when we are sending to this class post method, and so on for other stuffs. And what we have here is, as we discussed in the class-based views, we are just using the class-based view. We have to call the asView class, asView method inside of the class-based view when we have the like this parameters for the class-based views. And that's why I want to just close this one. Okay, let's the comment these two lines for now. and copy it. And let's open the last one, which is over here. And from so the class-based views, I want to the category list API view. I want to export category list API view, which means over here category list API view. Instead of this one, I want to use a category list API view as view, and that's it. For this is the difference between the function-based and class-based views. In the function-based views, we don't need any changes inside of the URLs by file. But when you are using a class-based view, you have to do it manually. So you have to set the name of the class, and if you forget about the as view, you will have the error because it cannot be implemented automatically. That's why as view function will be called when we have the class-based views. So the URL is the same, but for now I want to use this function, so this class inside of our application. Okay. So inside of these classes, API view classes, as we can see, we have the different type of methods. So different type of methods depending on the HTTP method name. So we might have the different type of methods, for instance, get, post. And depending on this HTTP method request, for instance, if I am sending the get request to this URL, and inside of the URLs, if I am saying that it should be the class API view, and it will just call the function, which is the name of the function will be the same as the name of the HTTP method. And for now, it should be implemented inside it. It should be implemented inside it, and as you can see, we are inside this function, and this request, which is comes from the postman and so on. As you can see inside of the class-based view, it will identify, depending on the HTTP method name, which function should be called. And comparing with the previous one, it's just almost the same thing, but this if-else blocks will be separated like functions. So you can copy this one, put it over here, and let's import the model. Let's import the serializer, and so this one. Okay, and that's it. And that's it. You can check it again and send it request, and you will have the results. And for the function-based view, you can also copy this one and put it inside of the post, and you will have the result for creating a new object. Creating a new object, and it will be implemented over here. The same thing for category detail API view. And inside of this function, inside of this class, you will have also the get function, which is the request put function, which is also will take as a first argument request. And last one is delete function, which is also will take the first argument as a request. And as you can see here, we have to implement it inside. If you have the detailed class, which means over here, if you have the detailed class, so category, oh, I have to import it over here at first. Category detail API view, and after that it will be available here. Category detail API view, and here we have the category detail API view as view. But inside of this class, I have to take the selected item. In our case, it's a selected category. By default, this category API view will expect the ID of the item using the PK value. Inside of this PK value, if you open, So the rendering and so on. So where is I have just so by default over here, when I'm using the ID of the some selected item inside of the detailed value, the next argument, as we did inside of the function-based view, the ID of the selected item will be sent to the function after the request object, which means over here after the PK object, I will have the PK argument, and by default it should be the none, because if someone sends without any PK, in that case you will have the error. That's why let's send over here the request, and we are inside of this function, inside of the get function, and PK equals to the 4, equals to the 1 which we are sending over here. And depending on the one, you can also implement all the stuffs same as before getting the data, this data, and implementing it, getting this data and implementing the depending on the HTTP method. And as we have here the class, let's here implement def get object implement get object function, which will take the PK value over here, and depending on the PK value, it will just return the selected object, in our case the category, or it will just raise error. Inside of the raise error, let's use not found error inside of the Django. I think exceptions or shortcuts. So not found. So which means over here will be the error. If you are sending the PK which is not existing in the database, it will just raise the error. And if you are getting the data from the database, here might be also PK. It doesn't matter. So the get object will be used inside of this each object. Let's copy this one, which means category equals to self. I want to call the self and get object function and pass there the PK value that was getted from this one. So this is just an extra function to get data from the database, to get a category from the database. So this category will be used inside of each of these functions. So copy this part. So also here we have the PK equals to none. And inside of the delete also we have the PK equals to the none. So we are passing the PK to this function, and it will return the category, and we are doing the same thing as before. And here we have the category delete and responding some message. By default, in the delete function, the response will be just empty, but in our case it's just a message like deleted equals to 2. And the results will be the same for updating, for deleting, and for all other cases. But in our case, we are just implementing the API using the class-based view. And we have to understand that depending on the HTTP method that was implemented over here, will be called appropriate functions from the HTTP methods, HTTP method names. So any questions for now, guys?
Excuse me, what's the difference between PK statement and the another statement from the previous class function-based view?
So the function-based view, so here we have the category ID, like a value inside of the URLs. So here we have the category ID. But in our case, we have the PK in the category detailed API view. PK as an argument like a selected category. And that's why inside of the methods, inside of our main methods, which are get, put, and delete, 3 type of methods, we are taking this pk value as an argument, and depending on the pk value, we are trying to get extract from the database that object. And if that object exists, for instance, if you are sending for showing the method, if you are sending a not existing result, you will have the not found error, which is a 404, which raise over here. If try will take if try returns the error, in this case it will go to the except part, and in the except part we are just raising the HTTP 404 error, which is like this, and it will just depends from the PK that was passed over here. So this number will be taken inside of this class like a PK.
No, I mean in this class-based view, you used ID, then PK. We cannot use the previous construction like in the last lecture.
You mean? So in last lecture, what was in last lecture?
Ну вот смотрите, вы написали int двоеточие pk, а на прошлой лекции вы не писали int двоеточие pk, вы просто дополнительный параметр автоматом принимали, как HTTP запрос.
Нет, вот он в предыдущих лекциях мы тоже так же делали. Вот он, integer, category ID было раньше.
Okay, I'm sorry, it's my mistake.
So it cannot be identified for our itself that so this number should be just like a variable for passing it to this function. It has to be if you don't need for using the integer or for all existing numbers, you have to use inside of the regular expression pass, which means over here repass, and after that inside of the repass you can extract the data that should be passed to the function. But in our case, in the previous lectures, also will be also was the integer and the name of the field that was passed to the function. And in our case, it would be just a PK that's passed to our class-based view. Okay, what is next? Request response we already know about the status. So about the status inside of the API views. If you are sending a request to the get function and getting the result, for instance, let it be the list of items, you will have the status code by default. It's 200, which is successfully implemented. But you can set it manually also. For instance, status for the response class, status, and inside of the REST framework, we have also the file, so the module called status. And this is just a simple Python file which have the different functions and all existing HTTP methods. So the HTTP status response for returning it back. In that case, status equals to 200, which is okay. For instance, if I'm creating some object, and after creating, I can set the status code like a 201, which is created. Like this, you can pass it manually. For instance, if you're sending so if you're getting an error, in that case, let it be the status code like a 400, which is a bad request. And if you are sending it again, you will have everything is okay. If you are sending something is wrong, in that case, you have the bad request status code, and depending on that status code, in the client side, it might be the Angular, it might be the other stuff. In the client side, this message will be shown in the different colors. For instance, if it's a bad request, it will be in the red. If it's 200, which is green. For instance, if you are creating an object and everything is okay, 201, in that case, in the Angular side, you can show the message box in the green color that your object was created successfully. Okay, like this, you can put the manually status codes if you need. Okay, for now, if we don't have any questions, we have to move on. And we have how many times? So I have lecture until the until the 1 p.m. So we have 1 hour, so that's why we have to just move on. So next section for implementing the views will be the generic views. Generic, let it be the version 1. So what is the generic? Generic means, as we see from the class-based views and function-based views, and we are seeing only for one class, so for one model, which is a category for now. But if you think and if you imagine, for instance, for the models like a product or for other models, for implementing the CRUD application, so the CRUD endpoints, the stuffs will be always the same. So here we are, again, we are changing only the name of the model and name of the serializer. And all other stuffs will be the same in the view side. Can you see and confirm this information? So for instance, if you are changing these all categories, category names, oh, sorry. These categories to the product, it will be just implementation CRUD application for the product model. And that's why, for this reason, from the developers from the REST framework, from the Django REST framework, was implemented the generic field. So the generic option, generic section in the REST framework. From REST framework, you can import the generic module. Inside of the generic module, you have different type of classes. One of them is, so the key, one of the main classes inside of the generic model, it's a generic API view, which extends from the API view which we implemented over here. So our classes here, in the previous example, was extended from the API view inside of the Django REST framework. But in the generic module, it says we have the new class called generic API view. Inside of the generic API view, we have the other so extra configurations in for our database, for our APIs, and it extends from the API view, which means this methods, this logic that the name of the method should be the name of the HTTP request, and so on. All other stuffs will be the same in the API view, but here we have the extra fields called the query set and serializer class. And why we are saying about the name of the class, if you are changing all the categories here to the product, it becomes as a product API view. And for that case, the generic API view will give the ability to implement it more generically. Let's implement the category. So let it be the names, let it be the same. Category list API view. And I want to implement using the generic API view, which means inside of the generic, we have the generic API view. I am extending from this class, and which means inside of it, I have the generic API view. I have the extra fields called the query set and serializer class. And we know that the name of the functions will be the same as before. And when you are using a generic API view, you can collect and you can mix them using the from inside of the REST framework. We have the file called mixins. Mixins is just also the Python, simple Python files. So it's just a simple Python file, which have the different type of classes. So the first class, which is a create model mixin, which extends from just object. It's just a class like a person, like a student, and so on. This create model mixin will implement only one function, which is called create. Create function will take the first argument as a request and will do some stuff. Next class, list model mixin, which will implement only one method, which is a list, and will do some logic. Retrieve, update, and destroy. And it's just a simple function which consists from the almost the 100 line of code. Simple function. So the simple Python classes. And what we can do, we can use generic API view as a core of our API view and mix it using use it inside using the mixins. For instance, if you are using the list model mixin and from the generic API view. From the generic API view, we know that it extends from the API view, and it means you have to implement the get method like we did before inside of this class. So we have to this type of two methods. Let's copy this one over here because let's import this one and this one and this one. So okay. Okay. So we are using the generic API view here, and we are using the list model mixin, which means if we are extending from this class, from list model mixin, it means this method will be automatically overridden inside of this current class. And what this method will do? This method will do the same thing as we did inside of the getting the results from this function, which means getting the result from the database for the selected class and serializing it to the inside of the serializer and sending it back to the response. And if you see the list function, it will just get the query set. Query set means get query set. It's just a function that will take all the fields from the selected item. And we can skip this one because it's just a pagination. We will talk about it a little bit later. And the next line, so the first line, which will take the database all the fields. And in the list function, we have also the same thing. And next line, we have the serializer, which is serializing the data. And in our mixin, we have also the serializer, which is a get serializer, which we'll call the get serializer function. And we'll pass our query set and equals to the many true, as we did here. And that's why I can remove this once. I can return a self list function. So list function located inside of this mixin. So this get method will come from this generic API view because generic API view extends from the API view. And after that, we are just dispatching the HTTP method name and the name of the method using this class. And inside it, we are using the list method, which is implemented over here. And I'm here passing the request object. And inside of the list, you might have the arguments and quarks, but it doesn't matter. You can pass it or you can skip it, or let's add it. But we don't have any quarks and arguments for now. That's why we can skip it. And that's it. And what we can do, what we have to provide to the list function is just a query set and serializer class. These two configurations we have to do inside of our class. And if you open the generic API, we will have also here query set and serializer class, which is a two configurations to our class. Query set, it's just a list of items that will be available to our API, which means category. So category objects all. Serializer class, which is a category 2 serializer. And that's it. These two configurations will give to our class the ability to identify which models I have to convert to the dictionary and which serializer I have to use. And inside of the post method, so let's check first of all the list of items. So first of all, I have to check inside of the view that I have to call this one. So call this one from views generic view 1, the category list API view. And let's immediately implement. So let's immediately create detail API view because it will be just inside it I have inside it I have category detail API view, and that's it. So if you send a request, you will have the same result as before, for updating and for getting a data, because I'm just exporting from generic API view, I'm exporting these two classes, and inside of URLs we are using the same classes, but in this case it will be get it from the generic file. And as you can see here, we are sending a GET request, and we are over here. Depending on the method name, we are calling the method, the GET method, and so on. And inside of the GET method, I am just redirecting it to the the list function inside of this mixin. And we have inside of our class, we have two configurations, which is a query set and serializer. And if you open the list mixin, it says it will take the query set from our class, which is this one. So query set equals to category objects all. And after that, the serializer will be taken over here. So instead of this one, will be used serializer category serializer 2, and will be the same thing. And as you can see, we can implement such like things without any implementation, just like passing the two configurations over here. And for implementing the creation of the new item, if you remember from the mixin, we have the mixin called create model mixin. And it's just enough to extend from also create model mixin. And it says inside of the create model mixin, we have the create function, which will do the logic for creation a new object. So it will take the request data as we are doing here, request data, and get serializer. It's just the name of the serializer that we are providing over here. And we don't need any more like the manually setting the serializer like this. And this was also calling the isValid function, but in this case it's a little bit different, because isValid you can use it like without any if condition. If you are don't work, you like pressing it like isValid, like if else condition. In that case, you can call the isValid and raise exception to it, which means if something goes bad, it will just return the response like error. And it will just call the perform create function, which is a simple function also. It will just a serializer save function called like in our example. And response will be returned back to our API. So which means we can delete all the stuffs over here. Return self, I want to call just a create function. Args, quarks, request, args, and quarks. So quarks. And that's it. I'm saving the file. It will restart. And let's try to create a new object. And as you can see here, we have the list of items that was created over here and implemented like this. So why we are doing like so? Because we talked about that all the creation of the new items, the logic of the creation and the getting the list of items, they are almost the same. It will just see these two configurations. So the name, so the list of items, that should be the get it from the database. And second one is which serializer you have to use to convert it to the different type of serializing or deserializing case. But all other stuffs will be the same. For the detail view, we'll have almost the same case, but in this case we'll have the put function here and delete function here. And our mixins will be different also. So first one, for getting in one item, will be the retrieve model mixin. If you open it, inside of the retrieve model mixin, we have the only one function, which is called a retrieve. And instead of the list, you have to call the retrieve function. And the arguments will be the same. Inside of the retrieve function, so let's put these two configurations also inside of our class. Inside of the retrieve function, we are calling the get object function to identify which object was selected. And after that, it will just serialize it and respond it back. And this get object function is implemented inside of the generic API view. This is a get object function, and it will take all the items from the query set, from this query set, and depending on the lookup URL value. So lookup URL value, which is a Quark value, by default it's equals to the PK, and a lookup field over here, if you can see, lookup field equals to the PK, which means by default it will expect that the ID pass it to our value like a PK. And if you want, you can also change this value to the needed data, for instance, category ID. In that case, you have to over here lookup field equals to category ID. Category ID, and after that, in the URLs, instead of the PK, you can use the category ID. But for now, it's not needed because it's enough to use a PK for our classes. So for retrieving, we are using such like a API view. So let's check it. So and it works. And for updating the new item, inside of we have to add a mixin, which is an update model mixin. And if you open, you can also see the implementation. So the instance, which as we are doing in the previous examples, getting the instance and creating a serializer, like a first argument is the instance and second argument is the data, as we did before, and checking for the validation, and after that just calling the save function, serializer.save function. After that, returning it back, which is update function over here. Instead of the create, I want to call the update function here. And last one is mixin for deleting, which is called the destroy model mixin. Destroy model mixin, which will take also selected item and perform destroy, which is just calling the instance.delete function. Destroy over here. And getting item here, and for instance, updating item here, and deleting item not found, which what tense we have. And tense item was deleted. And we don't have any tense item over here like this. So as you can see here, inside of the generic API view, we have some configurations for implementing the same result as we did before, but it's a more comfortably and more less lines of code. And for instance, for implementing for other classes, for instance, for products, the same case, you can do it like in this example. So I want to create one more class here, views generic. So generic and version 2. So REST framework import generic, and I want to implement the same classes over here. So the serializer, and inside of the URLs, I want to comment this line, and from views version 2 category list and category detail. So in this case, I want to use it from the second file, from the generic second file. So what I want to show for now. So we know that these functions is not logically needed. We know about it because it's just getting the function name and passing it to the, so it will just call the other function and return the result. And all other these stuffs will be the same for all other classes. That's why we can also remove these items. And inside of the generic API view, if you open this one, you have different type of already implemented classes, which means create API view. If you are using and extending from the create API view, it will just extend from the generic API view as we did before, like in our example, and all needed mixin. So in our case, it's a create mixin, and it will do all this thing as we did before. So the post method will be the taken, and the create will be called implicitly over here. For the list API view, it's the same thing. For the list mixin and generic API view will do this function for you. For in our case, so this class will be used for getting items and creating a new item. So that's why you have combinations also. So the list create API view. So over here we have someone list create API view, which is the same thing as in our first version. So the list create and generic API view. List create generic API view, and these two functions will be implemented for you already. That's why we don't need to write these lines of code for this second version, and we can remove this one. And for the retrieving the objects, we can also use a generic. So the retrieve, update, destroy, which means all these classes. So the retrieve, update, destroy, and generic API view, as we did in the previous example, which is almost the same thing, and these stuffs will be called for you. And you can also remove, oh, it's a second version. So we can also remove these lines of code. And we have only 3 lines of code for each class, and you can check the implementation. So for the list of items, for the creation of the new item, so getting the item, for updating, let it be the 11, and for deleting also, let it be the 11. So this is the power of the class-based views, and how can you extend the classes, and how can you reuse your classes. So any questions for now? Guys, any questions? Okay, you have to see today's record many times to understand and to remember all the stuff what we are talking today, and I think this is understandable for you. Also, questions?
Можно вопрос? Смотрите, можно ли как-то там уточнить, что, допустим, created user ID какой-то или что-то в этом духе, чтобы, допустим, один пользователь создал одно, другой это. Но как, типа, кому что принадлежит, чтобы это учитывать? Можно как-то там при delete, редактировании?
Okay, this is a correct question. So depending on the user's connection of our models. So for now, everyone can see and delete or create or new items in the database and so on. But it should be somehow connected with the users. For instance, I'm authorizing into the system and adding it like my objects for my categories and my items. So this section will be just continue. So the next slides from this presentation. Just a second, and we'll talk about it. So any questions for the APIs that we are doing over here from the generic API view? So you can, for now, you can implement very quickly. So very quickly implement for the product serializer model serializer. So the class meta model will be the product. Fields will be the ID, name, let that be the price. Which fields we have here? Price, description, and category. Description and category. Okay, we serializer created, and inside of the second version, I want to copy these 2 classes, and instead of the category everywhere, I want to use a product. I want to import it and import. So I want to change it to the just product serializer and import the product serializer that I already created for now, and that's it. And these 2 classes will be implementation for the CRUD operation for the product class, and you can import, so the export them in the list and the tail over here, and the URLs. It's enough to add products, and here we have the product, and that's it. And in the APIs, you can duplicate it and name it like a product. And here we have the products. So is it restarted? So let's restart it. It says some errors. So it says we don't have any comma here. And let's exit. And as you can see here, we have the so the list of products already implemented, and the same thing for other stuffs. So the product show products item 1 products, and inside of it you have to set the data for the products, and it says the name should be the name is required, and let's rename it so like this. Just implement the less lines of code. You can implement for the different for other classes also the API views, and depending on the classes and depending on what data should be seen for the sending request user. In our case, we don't have any filters, and we are just showing all the products from the database and so on. So from the slides, what we have to do now is so generic. So regarding to the related name, you already know, we discussed about it, that when we have the connection between the two classes, and the related name will be just a connection attribute over here instead of the product set, which is by default. So the write only inside of the products. Inside of the product, in our case, the category, it's just a connection. So connection over here. When you are creating a new item, you can create a category ID like this. For instance, category ID, it's an integer field, and integer field like a category. So let's show for now. So list of items. So list of products. Do I have any category ID? So we have the category ID over here. So in some objects we have the categories. So for those categories, as you can see here, we are just showing the ID of the category. In our case, it's a category. So you can change it to the category serializer also. For instance, if you are using here category serializer and the read only equals to true, in that case, this category will be not only one, but will be the object. So it should be restarted. And as you can see here, the category is not only one item over here. And in that case, if you have more extra fields inside of the category model, you can also use like a nested object inside of the JSON. So this is a product, and this is a category of that product. Like this, you can use inside of the categories like this. And while you are creating, you can create a category ID and an integer one, and instead of the category ID, it will be used only for write only true, which means when I am creating a new product, I don't have to set the object of the category. It's enough to send the category ID for adding a new item in the database. That's why This field will be the read only, which will show like this object, and this field will be used for adding a new item to the database. So adding a new product to the database, or adding a new item, or sorry, for updating a new item in the database. So it means inside of the products, you have here so category ID field, category ID, for instance, what to, so the name will be the some name, and price will be the some price. So for instance, like this. So such like configurations and such like nested objects can be done. For instance, inside of the category, if you have the extra nested object, you can also do it inside of this. So as you can see, instead of the integer field, we are using our own fields. In our case, own field is just a class that was created for the category object, and it should be just like a nested object over here. Okay, and for now, the string related fields and the nested related fields, which means if you are taking a list of categories, inside of the categories, you can also use so the product fields as a related. So we know that inside of the product, we have the category and the related name, it's a product. And that's why we can also add the products inside of the category. That means when we are taking a list of categories, we are just getting IDs of the product in those categories. For instance, in the first category, we have the cyclical products. For other categories, we don't have any products. We have only the names. So we are saying that we have the three type of nested objects. First one is primary key related field, which is by default like this. You can see that primary key, which means products serializer primary key related field, which is by default read only true. By default, it's a primary key related field. So has no PK. What else? PK to internal values, PK fields, it says. So the related manager has no attribute PK. So I want to see the many true, many false I have to pass here because we have array of items. So I forgot about the many true because it should be the array of items. So I have to restart it. And read only also. I think for after that it should work. Okay, let's send it again. So as you can see, we have the when we have without any items here, it should be the same thing because by default it should be the primary key related field. So as we have the list of items, we are saying that the many true and read only true. Second one, for the same thing, for the second one, for second option, you might use string. So the string related field. For the string related field, you will have such like a result, and this string. How can we this string? This string is just a name. So inside of the product, you have the toString function over here. And what format you are passing data over here will be used inside of this result. For instance, if I'm removing the price, you will have such like a result. And depending on the toString function in the product class, will be called, for each object will be called toString function and return it like this. And if you need, you can use a nested object also. For instance, instead of this one, for instance, you can use new class. Let it be the product to serializer, and this can be also reduced. Let's remove this one also. Product to serializer. So product to serializer will be used over here as a nested. Many equals to true and read only also equals to true. And in that case, you will have not string, not ID. You will have the list of products as a result. As a nested object, you will have the list of items. And when you are showing the category, you can also show depending on the category, you can show the list of products for each category. So as you can see here, we don't have any products. Okay, I think this is also clear, and we can move on. And do you have any questions for now regarding to the serializers, guys? So any questions, guys? Okay, we can move on. So if we don't have any questions, we can move on. So let's see the list of products. So for now, we don't need any product list. That's why I want to close this one. Okay, ID and name, and this is enough. And for now, the part or section for the authentication and permissions that was requested from some students. So the authentication inside of the Django REST framework will be done with using can be done using any different type of the authentications. So we'll have two cases. So we have authentication and we have authorization. And you have to understand the difference between these two parts. And you can read about them at your home. What is the difference between these two notions? So in Django REST framework, we have different type of authentication methods. For instance, basic authentication, token and session, and the third part authentication that can be implemented in your project. So after this type of authentication, which are already implemented inside of the REST framework, which is a basic authentication, token, or other authentications which are already implemented in the REST framework. But for today, we want to show a more flexible and more useful authentication method, which is called Django REST framework GWT. In our case, it's a JSON Web Token. Under this link, you can see this library, Django, so the JSON Web Token, which can be used inside of our application. For configuring to use this application, you have to install it. So pip install Django. So here we have the pip install Django framework, Django REST framework, and GWT. And after that, you have to immediately add it to the installed apps. So REST framework GWT should be installed as, and see. And after installing, you might have the configurations for the Django REST framework. In the configurations, let's add some configuration. So we want to remove the default permission class, and default authentication class we have to leave. Inside of the default authentication class, inside of the settings, we are saying that for authenticating the user, we want to use inside of the Django REST framework GWT this class, JSON Web Token class, which implements. So you can see it. So authentication JSON Web Token. You can see the content of that class. This class will take the user, and will check the credentials for the username, and password. And if everything is okay, it will just generate the token and return it back to the response. And in our configurations, we are saying that this class will be used for authenticating the users. And this is the first configuration for getting a data. So this is enough for using the JVT in our system. And what we want to do is we want to add new path called login inside of the Django REST framework. When we are using a login, so we want to just use from the so the REST framework JVT. Inside of the views, we have the view called obtain JVT token. Obtain JVT token inside of this class, you can see that we have only one serializer, JSON token serializer, which will take the username. In our case, it's a username and password. And username and password will be checked and authenticated. And if user is found, in that case, it will return the JVT result as like a token and user. And if it's not exist, in that case, user is disabled or user is provided credentials are not correct, or other errors depending on the results. So for this API can be used for obtaining the token in our system. So let's see. And I want to add here one more API in the whole, the core API, like a login. So login, and inside of the beta, I want to use a username, admin, and password will be this password. So if I'm sending the incorrect password, I'm getting the unable to log in with the provided credentials. As you can see, this is the result from this serializer, unable to log in with the provided credentials, which means else part, which means user cannot found in the database. If everything is okay, you will have such like a result. Such like a result, it's one object in the response, which is a token, which will have the different sections. This is the first section, second section, and the third section. And this token called the JVT, and about it we'll talk a bit later what data will hold be inside of this token. And like this, you can authenticate your user, and this token will be executed in the front side. In our case, it's the Angular side. So this token will be stored in the database, so in the local storage from the Angular side, and will be sent to all other APIs. So for instance, I'm sending a request to the list of categories, but without any authentication or without any data. If you open the generic API view over here, this is our list of categories. And how can I protect to give the list of categories to only for authentication per users? For that, we have the configuration here, the permission class. Permission class configuration is a list of tuples from REST framework permissions. We have the class called isAuthenticated. So just a simple class which will check the request user. Do we have the request user, and is it authenticated or not? And this class will be used over here. And after that, if you are sending a request, it says authentication credentials are not provided, which means you have to authenticate to get the list of items. And after that, you have to send a request to the authentication user, and you have to copy this token. And for getting a list of items, you have to provide it in the headers. In the top header here, I'm sending the authorization data. And for using a JVT, it will be expected in the value like a GWT space and our token that we get from the login part. And if you send a request, you will have the result. If you are changing, for instance, if you are changing only one letter here, sending it back, error decoding the signature. As you can see here, using the such like a logic, you can identify that the user authenticated or not. For so the time is okay. For not copying the oldest things, this token will be copied for all our other APIs. For that, I have to stop. So I can save this token after getting the result from the backside. I can store this token in our browser, like in our environment. So as you can see here, we have here token. So for that, we can create a response variable inside of the so this data which was returned back to our system, to our Postman result, will be stored like a JSON. So the response body, I think. So the JSON parse, I want to parse that data. So this parse, and after that, after parsing that JSON to the dictionary, I want to set environment variable. I think like this. Postman. I think it should be somehow. So why it's showing? Oh, okay. Environment. I think the function was. No, I think I have in the previous examples. I have in other examples. So let's copy from this login. Set environment variable. So it's like a set environment variable. Set environment variable, and the key will be the token, and the result will be the response. So response.token. So response, it's this one. Token, it's just a value of that token. And after that, I'm sending a request. After sending a request, after getting the response, the test part will be executed. Test part will take this response body and parse it to the JSON and store this data in the environment. So it means this data, this token will be stored every time, and I don't need to copy and pass to the category list. It's just enough to use this value from the environment here. And as you can see here, we have the result as we did before. And after login, after login, this if the token was changed, it's don't need to copy it back to our list of categories. If you are not providing the list of items, you will have the error like not provided items. Okay, like this, you can authenticate your users in the Django site. So any questions for now, guys? So for all other stuffs, how can I create an item using the user authenticated user? We'll discuss a little bit later. For now, is it correct? Is it clear for you how it works inside of the Django site?
To use login function, you should first of all create new user, yes, with password and
yeah. Yes, I have in our so I have so in our admin side. So I already created the admin, super admin, using the terminal, but you can create your, for instance, new user. Let it be the user one. The password will be the same. So two common. Okay, I created a new user, so user 1, and the password is like this. And as you can see, we have the token here. If the password is not correct, or password is correct, or user is not exists, in that case, you will have the such like error. And after that, you will have the authenticated user like a user 1. You can check it like if you open the list of items, and if you have the list of models, and put it here checkpoint. I'm sending a request to the user 1 and sending a request to the list of items. So I'm changing which file. Let's check it. So we are using the Django version 2. Inside of the Django version 2, okay. Mm-hmm. Is it? Okay, let's check it again. So I'm using the category list here. Category list here, and let's check it. Requests. Oh, okay. Inside of the get, I want to put a checkpoint. Why it is not getting the checkpoint? I cannot understand. Okay. Lists creates. Oh, let's check it like mixins, separately mixin, and here the generic API view. So the mixin list API view. And inside of the list API view, I will have this is like okay. List model API view. Mm-hmm. Okay, let's check inside of this method, which is a get request. So the get query set. So I'm providing our token that was authenticated from the login part. So after providing the token inside of the API views, inside of the views, you will have inside of the request objects. If you remember from the previous sections, after adding the DRF, the API views or class-based views, you will have the data object. So the data object, which is already converted to the dictionary and so on. And after providing the token, after providing the token and after configuring it like authentication from the JVT, you will have in the request object, you will have the object called user. And as you can see, user already identified, which is a user one, which was over here. If you are adding like an admin, passing it and token updated, let's send it back, token updated and send back to this request. And if you check the self request user, in this case, as you can see, it becomes as a user admin. So like so, you can provide the tokens in the header of the request, and depending on the token, will be identified which user just now sending a request, and depending on the request user, you can separate the list of items, like in overriding the get query set object. For instance, I'm showing if you are inside of the category, if you have the connection with the user, you can put a filter here, like a user equals to self request user. And in that case, you will have, so the user will have see only those categories that was created by himself. And such like a configurations can be done. And about it, you can also read by yourself. And in the next lectures, we'll talk about it a little bit more. Okay. For now, I think this is enough. And we have to take a 3-4-5 minutes break, and we'll continue. So guys, I will take a little bit time from your other classes. I think I see that from the timetable you don't have any classes after today's lecture. So I mean after the 1 p.m. So that's why I will take for instance, it might be the 10 or 15 minutes. So for now, I want to show the Angular part. So the Angular part, which means over here what we have, so GVT. So about the GVT, you can read by yourself. So GVT consists from these 3 sections. So header, payload, and signature, and so on. I will skip this one. So for sending authenticating the user, you have to send the authorization and GVT and space and your token that was received from the previous API. And so from the browser sends to the login URL after providing the username and password, and they will got the GVT token, and GVT token will be somehow stored in the browser side, and send it to the other APIs, like in our category example in the request header. So the request header will be provided those APIs, so that those tokens, and on the Django side will be identified which user sending a request right now, and depending on that will be responsive to the client side some data. So, and for now, for now I can skip this one. So now I want to go to the examples and read the 2021 week number 12. And here I want to use, I want to create a new Angular project. So the routing, let it be the yes, yes, and it will take a while for creation of the new application. Creation of the new application. So the project is created. So I want to open it in WebStorm. In the WebStorm, I want to open it. Okay. So browser is over here. The Postman is here. So for now, my backside, so the Django site is running. So the login is working. So the list of the categories, which is responding like this. So here I have the admin side. And okay, let's wait for a while for the indexing of our application, source, application, and so on. Terminal here. I'm waiting for indexing, for the finishing for the indexing. So we already know about the HTTP model inside of the Angular side. So the HTTP model, and how can we send a request to the other resources and for retrieving the data and so on. For that, ng generates. So I want to generate the component categories. Component categories, which is over here, and I want to ng serve. So ng serve to start our application. Okay. So we have the 100 this part on the Angular side. I'm opening the HTML file, and I can remove all the things over here, all the stuff, except the router. All the stuff except the router I can remove, and inside of the routing model, I want to add paths here. So the path, if it's an empty one, if it's a root, I want to redirect it to the component categories component. Categories component, and as you can see here, we have the category list. So the categories component, which is worked over here. Okay, what I want to do, I want to get this list of categories from this our Django site to the Angular site, and to show the such like items. So for that, I have to generate service. So the category service. Category service over here, and I want to inject our HTTP model. For that, I have to first of all add in the imports so HTTP client model, and after adding those model in the imports, I can inject it private HTTP and HTTP client. So it's inside of this file, and that's it for the providing the HTTP model inside of the services. And first method will be the get categories. Which will be the observable, and I have to expect some data. So the data will be like we know that the data will be the list of objects. Object will have the two items, two fields, which is the ID, which is a number, and the name, which is a field, which is a string. So that's why I want to create here file, which called models. Inside of these models, I want to export interface, which called the category. We'll have the ID, which is a number, and name. So the name, which is a string. Such like interface I have, and inside of the category, I will observable those category model like a list of categories. Get categories will expect such like a data, and inside it I want to return so the this HTTP get request, and inside of the get request also will be expected category list, and here we have the list of our list of items. So the base URL. So let's create here base URL. HTTP localhost 8000. So our base URL. And after base URL, we have this such like API for getting a list of categories, API and categories, base URL, API and categories. What's this? Okay. Camel case, lowercase, it's a constant, little bit like this. Okay, base URL and list of categories, and this function will be called inside of our component. Inside of our component, let's do it like h1 categories, and inside of the UL will be the list of items. So inside of the component, I want to create a array categories, which is a category list. By default, it's empty. Categories like this, and by default it's empty. and I want to show li inside of it. So ng4 let's see of categories, and inside it I want to show that c.id id will be the something, and comma, the name will be the something, c name. And that's it for listing items from the list of categories. And here also will be the function for getting categories. And I want to inject so the category service. Category service, which will be the class of category service over here, and that's it. And for getting categories, I want to send a request inside of the category. So this category service, I want to call the category service get categories function, this function, and this function will return the list of items. I want to subscribe. What I'm doing, you are already know, because we already did this example from the previous lectures. And I want to just, for now, I want to just log the data that's returning from the server side without any updating. I'm just so logging the data. So I want to, inside of the ng on init, I want to call this function, get categories. This function will be called inside of the ng init. If you refresh, if you open this part of the console, it says to sending a request to this URL, so the localhost 8000 and API categories, it will be protected from the CORS policy. So the CORS policy, which means you have here localhost server, and we have here localhost at the server side, and server side will protect all the protect all the items, so all the requests which are coming from other resources. That's why it says the CORS policy not allowed to identify to getting data from those files. In this case, from the Django side, you have to configure some changes. To do those configurations, in the Django we have the CORS headers module. This CORS headers module is just like this type of the library. You have to install it inside of the Django side, and after that you will have the little bit configurations added to the installed applications, and the instructions over here added to installed applications. And we have to add one more middleware, which should be before the common middleware. So here we have the common middleware, and it should be the before it. And this is a configuration. And after adding this middleware, we have the free options to allow the origins. Free options to allow other sites to send a request to our Django application. First of them is CORS allowed origins. In that case, you can list all of the APIs who can send the request to your system. So in that case, you can provide the list of items. And next one is using the regular expression, all the things, and using the regular expression. And the last one is CORS allow origin, which says, which is by default is false. If you are sending it to the true, it means everyone can send to your system, to your system request without any CORS origin. So let's use for now the last version, which is just allowing for all of other APIs to send a request to our system. And after refreshing it, you can see that we have the list of items which we are taking from the server side. And these items will be just, so the categories will be the data. And as you can see here, we have the list of items. So the list of categories that we have inside of the Django site. Inside of the Django site, if you are deleting some item, for instance, 16th item deleted, and in this case, the 16th will be also deleted over here. So like this, you can connect your Angular application to the Django site. So let's go to the Angular site, and we want to show. So we want to show the login form. Login form over here, which means login form will be so the div. This will be inside it. Inside of the app component, I want to create a variable called logit, which is by default equals to the false logit value, and ngIf. I want to put here ngIf. If logit value equals to false, in that case, I want to show this part. ngIf. If logit value is true, I want to show the list of items. And as you can see, I'm not logged yet. That's why login form. So let's put our inputs. So the input, so ng model. To use ng model, you have to add forms model here, forms model, and after that you can use two-way data binding ng model for our applications. So inside of the components. So inside of the app component, I want to create a username which is equals to empty, and password which is equals to empty for now. And inside of the HTML, I want to bind it to the username and password. And one more button to login. So let it be the P username like this, P password like this. It looks like this form, and when I'm clicking to the login button, I want to call the login function, which I have to implement over here. Login function. And inside of the login function, I want to log the username and password for now to check the correctness. So I'm typing something and clicking to the login button, and it says okay, so, everything is okay. And for now, I want to implement this API. So this API, which will hold like this API login, and which will return the token from our server side. So for that, I want to implement it inside of the category service. So the login, which will take the username and password, and observable will take a result. So we'll expect the result like this, object from the one key, which is a token. For that, let's create an interface. Export interface. So the auth token, let it be the token like string data. And this interface will be used in observable auth token over here. So the return, return HTTP post request. Why post request? Because we are sending here a post request to our server side. Post request will be this base URL, so API and login. And when I'm sending a post request, I have to provide data, which is body. Body should be somehow username equals to username, password equals to password. So this password, which we are taking from the from the form in this case from here, and I'm sending those data to the server side. But in the Java in the new versions of the TypeScript and JavaScript, if you have the key and value, if you have the same variable, in that case you can leave the key and it will just convert it to this part when I am sending the request. Okay, and that's it. So this login function will be used in our component. So for that, I want to create a constructor and private. So the private subcategory service, category service over here, and this category service login, and I am sending here the username and password, and subscribing the data from that API. Subscribing the data from that API, and let's console log those data that was returned to our API. Okay, what it says observer is not. So I want to expect here auth token as a result. So I'm sending something. I'm sending the request to the server side, and it says internal something error. It says append slash, which means over here I forget about the slash, and it says bad request. If you open the network tab here, it says unable to log in with provided credentials. If you remember, we have the admin user with the provided credentials, and if you click to this button, you will have the success and you will have the response like a token over here. As you can see, we have the token over here as a response, and in console I'm showing also the token. And what we talked about it, so in the Angular side, after authentication, after getting a token from the server side, it should somehow store those tokens in the browser side. In the browser side to send it to the new sending requests. So after, let it be over here. After sending a data, I want to flip to the logit value to the true. Logit value to the true, which means admin something, and I'm clicking to the login, and it becomes inside of the categories. And inside of the categories, I want to put one more button for one more button for logout. When I'm clicking to the logout, so it would be inside of here, button logout. When I keep clicking to this button, I want to call the logout function. So the logout function will be just, for now, will be just logit value equals to false. So I'm providing something, even it's not correct. I'm sending a request, and correct one, I am getting the bad request. Correct one, which will be the executed, and after that would be the somehow listed the list of categories. And I am clicking to the logout button, and it becomes as a bird. So after log it in, I have to put the empty for the password and username value to empty our form. The admin, something over here, log it in, and log out. Admin, something over here, and after log it in, if I am refreshing the page, I'm going to the front form login form again, which is not correct after authentication. And for that, I have to somehow identify that token that was returned from the backside. So those token that was provided from the backside should somehow stored in the browser side. So how can I store them? I can store them inside of the local storage. Inside of the local storage, I want to set item. Key will be the token, and value will be the data.token. Why I have such like a ability? Because inside of our service, I am parsing it like a auth token, and inside of the auth token, I have the token key. That's why I can set it like a token over here. So the local storage will be inside of the browser in application tab. In local storage, I have here token. I have to remove it. So let's add, after log it in, it should store it inside of the local storage. As you can see here, we have the token. And when I'm refreshing the page, which means when I'm loading our list of categories, so list of categories over here, I have to check if it's okay. And I can check it inside of the TypeScript. So let's implement ng. What would be ng on init. So if when I'm rendering our main application, I want to check that existence of the token inside of the local storage. So let's create a constant, which is a token equals to local storage get item token. So here I'm setting the item, and I want to here get item. If token exists, in that case, logit value equals to true. And after that, if I have the token in the application local storage, if I'm refreshing the page, I will have the list of categories page. And after clicking to the logout button, I have to I have to back to the login page, but the token already exists inside of the local storage. If I'm refreshing the page, I go inside of the categories. That's why when I'm clicking to the logout, I have to delete from the local storage. So the remove item token. And after that, if I'm clicking to the logout button, it will redirect to the login form and immediately remove to the token. If I'm refreshing it, I will have inside of the login form again. Okay, so we saved our token in the browser side, but in the backside, I removed the credentials for the token credentials for getting a list of items. If you send a request for now, you will have the error that says authentication providers authentication credentials are not provided. Which means if I'm opening this comment, which means somehow I have to send a request, I have to provide the token that was stored in the browser side to get a list of items. For that, for those section, in the Angular we have the model called interceptor. So what is the interceptor? It's just a middleware from your request and from sending a request before the backside. So before the backside, all your requests will be configured inside of the interceptors. So let's create a TypeScript file, which will be the auth token. So the auth interceptor. And I want to create a class auth interceptor which implements so the I think the HTTP interceptor over here, and it should be injectable. So injectable from core. And inside of this interface, HTTP interceptor interface, if you open it, you will have the one function which you have to implement, which is intercept. And you have to implement it. So this function, intercept function, will take the two arguments. First one is request, second one is handler, and it will return the request. So if you are doing anything, if you are just getting a request and without any changes, if you are passing to the backside, you can do it like next, handle, and request. And in this case, you will not have any, you don't have any changes in the request side. So you are getting a request and just passing it to the other side. So after adding this file, you have to configure your module, app module, to see your interceptor. And to that, you have to provider. Inside of the providers, you have to add one more object. First one is provide, which means HTTP interceptors. So we are adding our new interceptor, and we are saying that the use class auth. So I have to see interceptor. So it should be the export to see, from other file. Auth interceptor over here. So this file, this was created over here. And the next configuration is multi equals to true. And this configuration should be done for working with this our interceptor to handle our requests. Console log. Let's see the request from our side. And as you can see here, when I'm sending a request, for instance, sending a request for the categories, this interceptor will handle those requests before sending it to the backside. And in this case, I have to check. I have to check to the token in local storage. Let's get an item token. If token exists, in that case, I have to add to our request new header, like in our so it is here, authorization part and the GVT token. If token exists, in that case, I want to create a new file, so the new variable, which is a new request. Let it be the new request equals to, I want to just existing request, clone existing request, which means I have to just copy all the things from existing request, and I want to update only header. Headers will be request headers, and append. I want to append a new item to the header that was existing from the existing headers. The name of the header will be the authorization, and the value will be the GWT space and our token that was stored in the local storage, if we have. And after creating a new request with our authorization and GVT token, I want to return next handle, not previous request, but our new request which contains our authorization value, authorization token. And after that, let's log out. And let's log out. Application is not exists. Admin. I'm sending requests. And as you can see, token is stored in the network part. We have the categories API. If you open the categories API headers, if you list, go to the bottom side, you will have the authorization part here, which is added over here in our interceptor authorization GVT and space our GVT that was stored in our application token. And that's it. And that's it. Your APIs works only in the only for provided API provided tokens. If you don't have any item here, it will not show. The opening and closing one also will be work perfectly. And that's it for today. So why I am showing this part for this part of the project today, because in the next starting from the next week, you have to start defending your project from the front side without any connection to the backside, because backside connection with the backside we are talking only today, and that's why you have the 2 weeks. So the next so today, starting from the today until the 14th week, you have to time to connect your Angular project to the Django side. And how can you authenticate your users, and how can you send the configuration, how can you send the requests and configurations. And that's why we decided to show these examples today, to give you more time to implement those examples. Okay, any questions for now?
Когда вы писали на проверку токена, существует ли нормальный токен? Вопрос, если на бэксайде токен станет неактуальным, допустим, сессия испарится, то у вас же из authorized будет true, и типа эта проверка не подойдет. Получается, нам еще нужно как-то убедиться, актуален ли токен.
В принципе, когда, допустим, если, допустим, смотрите, внутри вот этого, внутри вот этой библиотеки есть конфигурация. Есть конфигурация, вот эта GVT конфигурация. Давайте я это скопирую ее. Так, я хочу скопировать вот эту часть. Я хочу поставить это внутри наших сеттингов. Получается, settings и datetime нам нужен. Давайте я это подключу. From Django conf, import settings and import datetime. So, что мы получаем из этого, получается, из этих конфигураций? Например, смотрите, если я авторизовываюсь, у этого пользователя есть вот разные конфигурации, там разные функции, и одни из них это expire data. Secret key и так далее. Expire data по умолчанию он для GVT токена стоит там 300 секунд. 300 секунд, например, давайте сделаем это на 5 секунд, допустим, на 5 секунд. Наш токен, получается, живет только 5 секунд. Я получаю, считаем 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Если я отправляю запрос, it says the signature has expired. Получается, если, например, фронт-часть авторизовывается, сохраняет токен, например, там 5 секунд проходит, 5 секунд проходит, и я отправляю запрос. И получается, вот этот запрос, который я получаю, список категорий, он уже не работает. Почему? Потому что он говорит, типа, signature has expired. Как раз всякие вот эти вот неавторизацию вам нужно будет ловить внутри получения, внутри получения списка. Внутри получения списка, вот мы сейчас ожидаем только success. Если это не success, тогда нам нужно будет уже выходить. То есть нам нужно будет где-то показать, что это signature has expired, и нам нужно будет уже перекидывать его на авторизацию, чтобы он еще раз авторизовался. Это уже, получается, это уже работает для вас. А вот тут можно будет конфигурацию делать, например, там не секунды, например, там вы можете сделать, там, если для теста, там days указать, и там 2 дня, да, ну, во время теста, чтобы каждый раз не переавторизовываться. А после того, как вы уже закончили, ну, по дефолту он стоит, как я, значит, помню, там 30 секунд. Это можно будет конфигурировать таким образом. А вот это он должен обновить refresh expire data, который там 7 дней живет. Он авторизовался в систему, через 7 дней он должен еще раз авторизоваться, даже если все правильно. Вот такие вот конфигурации можно будет сделать здесь. Так. Questions?
А как включить CSRF защиту, если мы вот используем generic views?
CSRF защиту. Generic views. Что вы хотите использовать? Нет, CSRF токен это и есть, в принципе, смотрите, когда я хочу, например, когда я имею форму, вот, допустим, форму, да, вот эта форма, когда генерится внутри браузера, она, получается, генерится, в смысле, когда генерится внутри браузера наша, так, где-то. Вот эта формочка, нам нужно будет сгенерить вот этот вот CSRF токен на фронте. Так как мы отправляем запрос через API, нам, в принципе, не нужен CSRF токен. Он не будет работать с CSRF токен. А если это CSRF токен, тогда, в принципе, нет смысла использовать generic, потому что generic – это у нас API. Если мы используем CSRF токен, тогда, в принципе, у нас должна быть на сервере, то есть Django должен генерить HTML-страницу, чтобы CSRF токен верифаить. Понятно, да? Если мы хотим верифовать CSRF токен, тогда мы должны сгенерить рендер нашей формочки, вот эта формочка должна генериться внутри Django. То есть он Django должен не JSON отправлять, а HTML-страницу. Тогда и будет, получается, генерация CSRF токена. И потом он будет валидировать, что он правильно отправляет CSRF токен. Мы как раз-таки работаем как отдельные проекты. У нас Angular сайт. Angular сам по себе там формирует вот эту вот форму и отправляет запрос. Так, вопрос? Так, идет вопросы? Ну, не 3 часа, да? 3,5 часа, да, получилось? Хорошо, если, ребят, вопросов нет, тогда, в принципе, на сегодня все. Я сохраняю рекорд. Вам нужно будет пересмотреть все моменты, понять, что где, как по Django сайту. Так, давайте сразу, чтобы не забыть, залью. Так, Django.
А на следующем уроке у нас будет лекция?
Скорее всего, нет. Мы сейчас с преподавателями переговорим. Скорее всего, сделаем защиту, потому что защита занимает очень много времени. Так, class-based view, function-based view и generic, да? Generic. Сейчас, минуточку. Так, generic, это у нас Angular и GVT. Давайте сделаем GVT. Angular Interceptor. Так, я залил в GitHub. Так, на следующей неделе, да, значит, по расписанию мы посмотрим, по группам мы посмотрим и определим. Если даже лекция будет, но не 2 часа, там не 3 часа, сделаем, наверное, для всех групп там 1 час, там про что-то расскажем, а дальше уже будет защита ваших проектов. Так, еще вопросы?
Каждый защищает
какие
свои
файлы нужно
системы.
добавлять?
Что? По одному давайте, ребят.
Окей, тогда я спрошу. Каждый защищает своим ассистентом, правильно же, да?
Да, мы тоже там будем, защищаемся значит, по группам, как мы разделились, в том файле, куда вы заполняли, там и будете работать. Так,
А какие файлы нужно, а какие папки,
Ага, да. Какие
извините, а
папки,
какие
что?
папки нужно добавлять в gitignore, чтобы не перегружать запросы в добавление в GitHub?
Точно файлы, это значит environment и и node modules. Так, давайте я покажу. Так, example. Так, webdev 21. Открываем gitignore. Вот где-то здесь есть, вот он, мои environment, которые я вручную добавил, env, не env. И где-то наверху должна быть папка node modules. Вот он, node modules папка. Node modules это чтобы внутри Angular не закидывать установленные библиотеки. И вот эти вот environment, которые у меня лежат внутри Python проектов. Environment тоже не должны добавляться. Это вот две основные вещи. Вы можете этот ignore файл посмотреть у меня в GitHub. В принципе, оно есть, просто можете скопировать, чтобы у себя тоже так было. Она должна быть где-то так, webdev 21. Вот он, ignore файл. Можете этот файл скопировать, у себя поставить и залить. Так, еще вопросы, ребят?
Ага, я вам в личку насчет проекта написала. Можете прочитать?
Хорошо, чуть позже. Вопросы? Так, ребят, если вопросов нет, тогда время уже все, time is up. Так, стоп.